The chair, I guess, will now yield to himself, since I look like to be the last person here, and one of those opportunities of being last is if you have had a chance to hear all the questions, and there's been a lot of great questions that have been asked. You know, as someone who was born into the airline industry, my mom was a 35-year flight attendant with United Airlines, and who married into the airline industry. My wife is a flight attendant with Hawaiian Airlines, you know, and who also is a pilot for Hawaiian. I want to thank our flight crews, our gate agents, our ground crews, who have really been on the front lines dealing with unruly passenger behavior, in many cases dangerous and violent acts of aggression. And I also want to emphasize that passengers and individuals that assault, threaten, intimidate, interfere with airline crew members, that the FAA and the Department of Justice need to conduct swift but thorough enforcement investigations. They need to impose at least civil penalties against those passengers. And if those civil penalties are not deterring really criminal activity by these airline passengers, that the Department of Justice needs to look at how these individuals can be criminally prosecuted. And so that's something that I hope the FAA and the DOJ will do. You know, in regards to masks, you know, we all want to, you know, stop having to wear masks on airlines when we fly. But we do know that masks in combination with vaccinations are the most effective tool to stopping the spread of COVID-19. You know, air travel is one of the most controlled indoor spaces and modes of transportation. And so the current guidance where we need to wear masks through early January 2022, I think is a good thing. With the Delta variant, with the upcoming flu season, keeping ourselves protected is really important. My first question was going to be directed to Ms. Beyer and Airlines for America, and that's in regards to when the early part of the pandemic, airlines took the step to change seating arrangements in the airlines to space people apart farther. Can you speak to or answer in terms of the airlines that you represent? Have all the airlines gone back to booking at full capacity and are no longer blocking seats to maintain that social distance between passengers?
Thank you for the question, Congressman, and thank you for recognizing the work that we have all done as an industry throughout this pandemic, a really unprecedented, it goes without saying, time to evaluate what we knew about this public health emergency. And really, you know, I think the airlines have leaned into science since the beginning to determine what measures need to be put in place to keep all of our employees and the traveling public safe throughout the pandemic. In terms of seating, you know, as we've all done throughout this pandemic, we've learned more and more about this specific virus and about the variants that have emerged. And so our policies as the airline industry have been adjusted along the way as we learned more about the virus itself. Specifically on the seating, one of the things that we've done is work with Harvard School of Public Health to evaluate the risk of transmission in air travel. And one of the things that they determined is that in the air filtration, you know, 2 to 3 minutes, the air is cycled out, the HEPA filters on board, the mask wearing, all of the other measures, that you are safer on board an aircraft than you are in many other routine daily activities. And as a result of that science and you know, studies from many other reputable sources, that is when the decisions were made for those who had adjusted seating policies that it was safe to resume a full aircraft.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Ms. Nelson. In your testimony, you wrote, over the past few months, CWA ground service members across the country have experienced serious incidents of physical and verbal assault and harassment with few repercussions for the offending passenger imposed by law enforcement. By failing to follow the law and seek justice for the victims of assaults like these, a message is being clearly communicated that the safety of our airport workers is not a priority. Ground service members are the last line of security before these agents have the opportunity to board the aircraft and disrupt service. So my question would be, what do you believe are the next steps we can take to protect our ground service members?
Thank you, Congressman Kahele. Let's be very clear. This is extremely important that we protect the ground service members because, as you said, they are the last chance to keep problems on the ground. And when there is no follow-up, when they are physically assaulted, what do you think there is going to be the response? In many cases, there is a single agent at the gate who is dealing with all of the passengers. And when you are under threat, what you want to do is to get away from the threat. What that does is it potentially puts a situation where there's a desire to actually put that passenger on the plane to get them away. So these are some of the consequences that can happen if we don't take these acts seriously. There have been gate agents who have been punched in the face repeatedly and no action has been taken. Law enforcement doesn't come fast enough and the prosecution has not happened. There are at least 3 cases that are noted in my testimony that I would direct the Department of Justice to immediately that are very clear, well-documented cases of assault against these gate agents. There needs to be criminal action right away because otherwise we're sending the message to these workers that they are on their own. And the decisions that they make then, that they will be forced to make for their own safety may not be good for the safety of all of aviation. That is the consequence that we face if we don't back them up.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Last question I have, I guess it can be directed to both Ms. Beyer and Mr. Bidwell, but you had mentioned, we had mentioned through this conversation that sometimes airline crew members, and it could also be gate agents, are reluctant to stay around to press charges even when they have been assaulted. And I'd kind of like to know what are the reasons for this, and is there a way that we can either incentivize or do something to support those airline crew members so those cases can be captured and the investigation can proceed forward? And I guess we can start with Ms. Beyer.
Yes, sir. So first off, I will say right up front that our airlines are doing everything possible to better prevent and respond to these incidents. And that includes having regular dialogue with their employee groups, including the gate agents, including the flight attendants, including the pilots. We take this extremely seriously, and we want to make sure that our employees feel supported to be able to report these incidents, and that we as their airline are going to take them seriously, are supporting them, and are doing everything in our power to address the issue.
Mr. Bidwell?
Thank you very much for the question. So in accordance with TSA regulations, airport operators provide law enforcement officers with arrest authority in the number and manner adequate to support their federally approved security programs. And I would note the challenge is not the number of law enforcement officers available, it's one of jurisdiction, or rather the lack thereof. Indeed, airport law enforcement responds when called, but can only enforce state and local law. In order to pursue cases, they need crew members to stick around. They need them to provide statements, whether those are processed locally or then referred on to federal government, including the FBI.
All right, thank
Congressman
you.
Kahele,
Yes, go ahead.
we really need from the airlines a clear communication to the pilots, to the flight attendants, to the gate agents that when these incidents occur, their first priority is to stay, write the report the incident, and make sure that the local law enforcement has all of that they need. So I agree that the airlines have tried very hard to be supportive of crews in these events, but that clear communication to the crews that this is their first order of business after these incidents has not been made and can be made more clear. And those procedures can be communicated more clearly to all of the crews and the agents at the gate.
Ms. Beyer, in response to Ms. Nelson's comments, what does the airlines do in terms of when a crew member, if it's in flight and they send a message to the station manager that they're flying into? What do the airlines do to make sure that there are representatives of the airlines, station managers, others that meet the crew at the aircraft and are able to capture those statements from the flight attendant or pilot, to work together with local law enforcement agencies and take a proactive role to support those crew members, you know, when they do land at their locations. They've been working for a long time, they're tired, and they, at that point, just want to go home. And in many cases, these assaults go unreported.
So certainly, if the crew, reports that there is an in-flight incident and they are requesting that law enforcement respond to the aircraft upon landing, then the airline employees on the ground will forward that request to the local law enforcement and request that support. I did want to come back to something I noted in my testimony, which is this larger sort of cross-industry best practices effort that we are undertaking at this moment. I think that the many comments that have been made by my fellow panelists today are evidence that one of the ways that we can continue to improve is by enhancing the collaboration, not just within airlines, not just within airports, et cetera, but across all of the aviation sector. And our hope is that this effort, bringing in all parties who have a responsibility, that we can identify what some best practices may be by certain entities that perhaps can be enhanced by others. And we're committed to doing that.
Okay, thank you. All right, see no further testifiers. I want to